This is Why Small Business Matters from Northumbria University, supporting small businesses with the Help to Grow Management Programme.
Welcome back to Why Small Business Matters, brought to you by the Help to Grow Management team at Northumbria University. In this episode, we ask the question, is it true that being a good person makes you a successful one?
I mean, one of our brand values for any of your listeners that are obviously here or from the Northeast is to be canny. That to us, and that kind of likability factor, is also actually one of our superpowers.
That's the voice of Raman Sehgal, the Floundering founder and global president of Raman Marketing and best-selling author. He's also host of Molecule to Market, the pharma and biotech podcast. From Newcastle and a graduate of Northumbria University, Raman started the company in 2009. The business is now a multi-million-dollar global marketing and content agency with a focus on life sciences. It's described as the agency for ambitious companies looking to raise profile and to generate leads in the pharma and biotech sector. Welcome, Raman. Tell me a little bit, Raman, about your business, about Raman Marketing.
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, thanks for having me here, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today. So, I mean, Remarketing is a business. We're effectively a full-service kind of content, digital marketing and creative agency that specifically supports ambitious businesses that operate in the kind of bio and pharma tech ecosystem. What makes us even more niche is it's not necessarily working with what you'd expect as pharma companies where we are promoting drug products or anything like that. It's actually in the supply chain of the sector, which is a huge $100 billion plus global supply system of, developers, manufacturers, packaging companies, analytical companies. So really technical, scientific B2B companies. So we support those companies in helping them kind of get noticed, raise profile, generate leads, specifically amongst the community of drug development type companies. So if I give you the example of a COVID vaccine, so assuming you've had a COVID vaccine, there's a high chance our clients would have been involved in helping develop, make, package, test, and ultimately get that product safely to the pharmacist or doctor that administered it. So that's the kind of space that we play.
I've got so much to ask you today, but I'm going to throw one question at you first. In the introduction to your book, which we'll come on to later, your great friend and mentor, Fiona, who's also an investor in your business, describes you as a really good person. And she saw, I think, a spark in you very early on when you were helping her company. But is it true that being a good person can make you a successful one? What do you think about that?
That's a really good question. I mean, I can only speak, I suppose, from my own perspective, and I suppose being a good person has definitely, which probably comes from the way I was brought up, the values instilled from my parents and my family, etc. And I believe that as a consequence of that, I think we've always looked after people really, really well. So in terms of the manner in which we engage with our team and look after them and really care for them, I think that comes from stems from just being a good person and treating people the right way. And I suppose where it extends is also doing that with clients and other stakeholders, where just a simple moral compass of doing the right thing, being transparent, being honest, just being nice to people. I mean, it's not overly complicated in that sense. I think it's definitely contributed to my success, but also I think how we differentiate the business, interestingly enough. I mean, one of our brand values, which for any of your listeners that are obviously here or from the Northeast, is to be canny. So we talk in our business about be canny, and it's fun because we have a US team and we have to explain what canny means. And that to us, and that kind of likability factor, is also actually one of our superpowers when we compete against agencies all over the world. And so it makes us come across as a different type of organization, the type of company you want to work for, the type of people you want to engage with. So I think it's definitely, it's been a fundamental pillar to, I think, some of the success that I've been able to have, and also the kind of business that we've done as well.
I'd like to talk about your book because it's 24 lessons on how to refocus your business and be a better yourself, be better. I think it's a great self-help book. I don't run a business, but I took a lot from it. And I'm not going to talk about the entire book because I think our listeners should go out and buy it. But some of the fantastic lines I picked up very early on were, don't moan about taxes. Taxes are proof that you're making money. And I just thought that was a really, interesting point to make very early on in the book. But the other one that really stands out is imagine meeting the person you could have become. Can you unpick that for me? Because it's quite a complex idea, really.
Yeah, it is. And I stumbled across it years ago when I was listening to a podcast, and it jolted my brain when I heard it, because I kind of had this I projected, being on my last day at Earth and effectively at the gates of heaven, or whatever your belief system is, basically meeting a much better version of myself. Kind of like, hey, dude, like, you could have become me and you've ended up like that, and playing that out, being, oh my God, like I do not want to get to the end of my life and realize that I have not given it my all and I've not become the best version of myself, and the repercussions of what that means, being the best dad you can be, being the best husband, being the best brother, son, etc., being the best in business and leaders. And I think for me, when I read it, I ended up going down a path of actually almost re-engineering where I wanted to get in life and what I wanted to do based on what would I regret. So, because what that statement does is it projects you into the future, and it almost makes you think, if I haven't done X, Y, and Z, I'm going to be really devastated. And so one of the examples when we did that, or when I did that, was I really wanted to live in a different country. I wanted to take my family, and then the opportunity came up to go move to the US and take remarketing to a new continent. And I remember just thinking, you know what, if I don't do this, I'm going to regret not doing this decision. I'll be at the last day of my life, and that version of myself would have went and lived in a different country, etc. And so, and don't get me wrong, I don't make every single decision in life via that, because it's not practical. But I think some key decisions in your life about what you'll really regret of it's really helped me personally, and it's something that I think ultimately it's right at the start of the book, and the reason it's right at the start of the book is then a kind of a framework for, right, well, write some of this stuff down for you personally and your business, which is like, what are you going to regret if you don't, if you go to the future and think about yourself in the future, what will you regret? And that then effectively re-engineers some key goals and milestones. And that's how it worked for me anyway.
And I think what you talk about, the common themes that run through it are courage, discipline and focus, which is what we hear very much when we talk to founders and what they need to do in their business. But you also describe being intentional. How has that helped, being intentional in your business?
I think especially in the early days of running a business, especially a startup, is you kind of just crack on and you just do it. And for a lot of people, it just organically takes off. But it can happen kind of in a very chaotic, unplanned way. I'm not talking about the kind of, startups that get a bunch of money and they have a very clear plan of action. They spend other people's money. I'm talking about the vast majority of kind of bootstrapped entrepreneurs that start their business because they've either got an idea or they've seen an opportunity or they're trying to solve a problem. And so for me, I certainly had several years of that, but kind of found myself like wandering in directions that I didn't necessarily want to go, or that wasn't my chosen route. And so I think for me, being intentional is as much about your business as it is your life. Like if you don't make the time to do things that are important, if you don't dedicate the time to do what's important for your business or work on certain projects, then it's not going to happen by accident. And again, you're going to end up with a regret situation, which is, well, why did I not end up buying that car? Why did I not end up living in that country? Why did we not end up doing this, doing that? I've literally just come back from the World Cup, and that was a very intentional decision, which is, God knows what's ahead in life, but I want to go to the World Cup at some point in my life. I want to go see England play, and I'm going to go with my best friends, and that's what we did. It was a very intentional decision to be like, let's go do something that we're all going to, they're memories, it's an experience, something we're never going to forget and we're never going to regret. As opposed to being in my 60s thinking, I've always wanted to go to a World Cup. So I'm almost like, I think, again, going back to that projecting into the future, you can start to work out what you really, really want to do. And so that leads you to it, just for me anyway, just being a lot more intentional with the bigger picture stuff, but also just your time. One thing in the book I didn't go into, which is probably one for book number 2, is probably just around being intentional with your time. I think, there are a lot of productivity books out there, but, I'm obsessed with making sure my time is spent in the right place at work in particular. So, I have a handful of key things that I do in the businesses I operate in. And I try and make sure that, so one of the things is make sure that I have a profile out there which actually benefits the business, it benefits the book and all that kind of stuff. So being here with you, talking to you today, Sarah, is intentional. It's not like, oh, well, I'll do this. It sounds great. There's an element which is I've got a connection with Northumbria University, and actually I just feel like it's a good thing to do, and it's a bit of giving back. So that aligns to the right thing to do as well. But, you and I wouldn't be on this call if I felt like it's not, if it was just an accident. And so I think a lot of people become busy fools and just like go from pillar to post. And so certainly in my experience, the people that have been really successful around me have had clear plans and they've executed them really, really well. And they've basically just said, right, ignore the rest. And there's a great book by Derek Sivers called, I think it's Hell Yeah, or something like that, or Hell No, I can't remember what way it is, but it's, it's effectively, if it's not a hell yeah, it's a no. So it makes you really think about the decisions that you make. There are other great books about, just say the no to everything. I'm not that extreme, but there's a lot of truth in, people tend to get overwhelmed because they just say yes to everything, and they haven't got the discipline, back to the word you used, to say no. So I think the intentionality and the discipline thing works really, really kind of important together. And if I extend that into my personal life, I've in the last few years run a few marathons, and in order to run a marathon, you've got to train incredibly hard, and it's not only difficult, it's incredibly time consuming. So in making those decisions to decide to go for a 3-hour run on a Sunday morning, that's at the expense of something else. And so again, that intentionality is an opportunity cost kind of decision that, okay, I'm not going to go out and have 5 pints on Saturday night because I'm not going to run 3 hours the next morning. So and actually, it's a gift you get back and you can use that time effectively. So that's just some of the, I suppose, not the lighter heart, but some of the kind of more nuanced and kind of tactical stuff where I think intentionality is really important.
And talking of weighing stuff up, you talk about the owner's curse. So balancing being the protective businessman and getting on with the day-to-day and pushing your business forward, but with the ambitious entrepreneurial character. But you describe the former attitude as being a bit riskier.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of examples out there of companies that have got to a level of success and they've opted to stick instead of twist. And it assumes everything's going to stay the same. And in reality, the world has told us anything over the last few years, nothing tends to stay the same. Like, things change constantly. And so high profile brands, you look at Blockbuster Video and Nokia and brands that were very successful in their heyday, but decided, actually, we are just going to milk this cow forever. And what tends to happen is something comes along which then surpasses the incumbent in the manner in which they do things. And so it's a little bit about that, which is actually, standing still, I always think, is much riskier than moving forward, because you don't know what's behind you, if that makes sense. And so for me, that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, when you run a business, is if you get to a certain level of success, you almost want to put your hands around it and ring fence it and be like, okay, let's just keep doing this forever and ever. And that might be fine. Like, for us, for example, like, we work in a specific market. We have no intention of going to do, food or retail or law or whatever. Like, we're intentional about that. But what we're equally as intentional about is constantly improving. We have a phrase in our business, we present to our team every quarter, and it's on all of our slide decks, and it's, be better than yesterday. I think it's actually in the book. And so that whole idea is like constantly be improving, guys, like constantly be improving yourself, constantly be improving the work, constantly be improving how we do things. And as a consequence, we are always collectively nudging forward. obviously in the early days of a business, you can do it at a much more accelerated pace. But we're at 75 people now at remarketing, so it's a bit more difficult. It's interesting. I've got that business, which is now a bit more established, and I have a talent business in the life science sector called Lead Candidate, and that's only a handful of people. That business can pivot and change and move so quickly because it doesn't have to communicate it 50 times to 70 odd people. And so that's the way I look at it, because a lot of, particularly here in the Northeast, I think one of my frustrations with Northeast businesses in particular is a lot of them are just lifestyle businesses when they could become a lot more. I remember specifically a Crossroads, which was, the Entrepreneurs Forum call it the £1 million business. When a business is making or turning over £1 million a year, the owners can make really good money. So whatever the type of business is, even if you're making 10% margin, you're making 100 grand a year or whatever. But actually, high value business, you could be profiting 300, 400, 500 grand a year on that type of revenue, and then that's enabled your life in a way that you probably could not have imagined. And then it gets tricky for an owner at that point to be like, okay, do I roll the dice even more? In my experience, I decided to roll the dice and that worked out and continues to work out well for me. It's not right for everyone. And I think rolling the dice actually sounds very risky, but I think if you take calculated risks that are in line with where you see the opportunities, so it's not like just, willy-nilly employing 50 people overnight. It's just being very, back to the word, intentional about what you're trying to achieve. So that's some of my thoughts, I think, around on the kind of curse piece.
And I think one of the things I really liked about the book was it's great to be, self-help and offer all this advice, but it's very practical in terms of, thinking about if you are in a service business, think about your clients, think about that matrix of who's really difficult, the high maintenance clients and whether they actually bring you much profit, and those clients perhaps who, tick along, they bring in the revenue and they're low maintenance, and, you mentioned looking after them, but it's about going through intentionally and looking at whether you want those clients at all. Tell me a bit about why you thought that was important.
Early on in the book, it starts with talking about, if you look at your existing client base and work out effectively who are the good clients and who are the bad clients. And it's slightly more challenging when you have a client that's a nightmare but actually very high profit. And so what the book guides the reader in is kind of like, take the time to step away from the day-to-day, which is really hard for some people to do that, and effectively plot them on this matrix where you have a combination of maintenance and how high maintenance or low maintenance are versus the profitability. And certainly in our experience, what we got to a point where we were like, okay, there are a bunch of clients in the high value, low maintenance bucket that are a good blueprint for what we want in the future. And that ultimately led us down the track of actually just niching the business and deciding to focus entirely on the life science supply chain. Because at the time we did it in 2016 or 15, we had 30, 40 clients from different sectors, but it was like a fog lifting. I distinctly remember it happening and being like, it was like not quite a light bulb moment, but it was like a clicking together of a jigsaw, like at the end of a movie when it all comes together. It was like that type of sixth sense moment. But actually it wasn't particularly complicated. You don't need to do an MBA to be able to do it. It was look at your existing clients and basically work out who the best ones are. And could that lead you down a path of getting more clients like that? And that decision amongst a couple of others were key, like some of the most important decisions. So again, very practical tool that anyone that can use. And it's funny you mentioned service. The business was absolutely written for people with service businesses. And one of the huge pieces of feedback that I've had from people who've read the book is actually it's just applicable for people with product-based businesses as well, because you could look at that by your product portfolio. And someone like yourself, you mentioned you're not necessarily a business owner, but the second half of the book is absolutely applicable to anyone who I would say is a professional who cares about their career. You have this, when you start writing a book, you do a vision statement, and my vision statement, that my champagne moment wasn't like it's going to be an international bestseller or it's going to make loads of money. Far from it. Actually, it was just like, I hope this actually helps someone. And it turns out that it has, and that's been a really humbling experience, and one that I'm very proud of.
And I think one of the things I took from it was the fact that when you're starting a business and, you're just pleased when people actually come to you and say, yes, I want to do business with you. But it's about sometimes being able to say no.
Yeah. In the early days of running remarketing, we used to take on any projects. We did very little qualification. And I remember one project in particular we took on, and it was a brand project. And I knew the guy. And for me, it was like, ooh, they're in a really posh location, and actually that could be a link into a new market. And I was blinded by all the good stuff, right, and not mindful of actually, have we qualified this client? Do they know what they're getting for their money? And I think the way I think about it now, as I reflect back, was they thought they were buying a Ferrari, and actually what they were buying was a 2001 Fiesta or whatever, being budget based. And actually what that led to was a huge misalignment in expectation right at the start. And it was just a horrible project. Like it went really badly for both sides, actually, to the point where we rang them up and said, look, we don't want to work with you. We're going to send the money back that you've paid, but we are not the right partner for you. And I remember like the post-mortem that we had, it was like what the heck just happened there? And it led to us actually coming up with something called a defense checklist, which is been refined over the years, but because there's like the demographic and firmographic like segmentation pieces. You're like, are they in the right sector? Do they have the budget? How are they funded? What's the ownership? Like the nuts and bolts stuff you can. But then there's a softer element of it, which is like, well, are they nice people? Like, do we want to work with them? And some of it is just gut, right? Like it's hard, and you have to trust your team on making the decisions for the right reason. But where it gets much more complicated is if you have an existing client and then the personnel changes and you end up with a nightmare. That's something we've had to deal with a lot. And equally, it can go for the client side as well, right? When a client buys into you guys and you have a team on there, and then the team changes and the chemistry fit's not there. But in particular, I think for us, there's I mean, again, I'm not going to curse, but like, I'll use an American phrase, but it's like, is this person a douche? I'm going to say, like, they're literally on our list. It says, is this person an idiot, or are they a bad person? Are they a bad egg? Do you get a bad feeling? Whatever the right phrase is. And if the answer is yes, then we walk away from the opportunity. And back to your thing about just saying no, what we found is like, the energy you burn on those opportunities and the stress it causes and the implications it has for your team and your organization well outweigh whatever money you can make off that opportunity. And the other thing is then your time burn doing that comes at the expense of, you could be out looking for growing existing relationships, right? And so that's some of the saying no piece from a business perspective that we found. I always encourage business owners. What I would say is it's difficult to do on day one. I think what you've got to work out is as you start growing a business, you find your way, and then you kind of work out, it's a bit like we've talked about, like how to be intentional, what type of stuff we want, what are our clients, like what are the dream clients look like. And I think once you have the courage to do that, and for us, we did, because we were in a sector that we knew had a lot of potential, then saying no became a lot more comfortable. But it wasn't in the early days, because you were just like, oh my God, I've got bills to pay, I've got salaries to pay. Do we say no to this opportunity? But you have to stick to your guns and stick to your morals and stick to your values, and that was important to us.
You're listening to Why Small Business Matters. Find out how Northumbria University can help your business thrive through the Help to Grow management program, delivered by leading small business and enterprise experts from Northumbria University, with the support of leading figures from industry and experienced entrepreneurs. The program supports senior managers of small and medium-sized businesses to boost their business's performance, resilience, and long-term growth. The 12-week program is 90% funded by the government, and the fee payable by participants is £750, and has been designed to allow participants to complete it alongside full-time work. The in-depth, high-quality curriculum supports you to build your capabilities in leadership, innovation, digital adoption, employee engagement, marketing, responsible business, and financial management. By the end of the program, you'll develop a business growth plan to help you lead your business to realize its potential. To find out more about the program, The modules, eligibility and fees and delivery dates, go to northumbria.ac.uk/help to grow.
You're listening to Why Small Business Matters. Today I'm joined by Raman Sehgal, founder and global president of Ram Marketing and author of the book Floundering Founder. Now, in 2015, you described that the business was really growing, changing. You had opportunities with international clients, a hectic home life, the kids, etc. But you say in retrospect you were floundering, hence the name of the book, I suspect, and that you had a bit of a period of self-doubt or even imposter syndrome. How did you overcome that?
I read a book. That's how I did. I read a book called, I think it's called A Miracle Morning, on the Morning Miracle. I always get it the wrong way around. And it's funny because quite a lot of the conversation today, Sarah, has been around the types of components that led to the overwhelm. And it's not, and what I found is speaking to other founders and entrepreneurs is I'm not the only guy or girl that goes through that. There's definitely a point, and it's funny because the book effectively starts at that point, which is you're going through a crap time, you feel like you're in a rut, you can't. I think I described like how I was feeling at that time, and I just felt a bit lost actually, because like the early success and the adrenaline and the momentum had kind of, the novelty had worn out, and I was just in this position where I was like, there was more stress than anything. You know, some clients weren't happy, had more people, you always got issues with staff, and then the work wasn't as good as it used to be. This real, and then our home life, we've got 2 young kids, and that brings its own challenges. And I remember just being like, God, this is just too much to take on. And I read that book called The Miracle Morning, and it's a very like Americanized book, but actually like the fundamental of it is, find some time, make that time for yourself in the morning, and use that time to effectively, however you want to use it. But the book talks about doing affirmations, meditating, exercising, visualizing the day. Like there's a handful of things. I can't remember what the 6 are. I've probably got the book behind my head somewhere. But I basically thought, I'm gonna. And it was the end of 2015. It was the January of, and I remember we were in York, and I was doing the half marathon in York, and I was sat in a McDonald's at like 6 o'clock in the morning. It was the only place I could get a coffee, with my journal, and I started journaling around that time as well. And so, it almost like was that being more intentional with myself and being more structured with where I was spending my time and what was important to me, and having clear goals for the year and a vision. That almost then was kind of bled into the business as well in a positive way. And so, that juncture just was ultimately the domino, I think, which led to our decision to just niche the company, or ultimately our decision to move to the US, to hire a CEO. Like a lot of the big decisions came off the back of that particular period of life. And it's a bit like, I suppose, sometimes I think you get a book that hits you at the right time of life. There are books that you can start reading, you're like, it's just not for me. And you can go back to them 5 years later and they seem more relevant. And that book just hit me at just the right time of life. And it's a bit like I hope my book does for people, which is, that message that the guy sent me on LinkedIn. It just got him at the right time of life, right? It was exactly what he needed at this juncture, to just basically be like, you know what, it's all going to be okay. Sort your crap out, you'll be good. It's a similar type of concept for me.
And talking of books, you advocate carving time out each day for learning. So you say, learn every single day, look after your brain like your body. You've mentioned you run marathons. Read a book, but why non-fiction?
That's a good question. I mean, for me, I suppose everyone gets their fix of fantasy from wherever they want, right? So and for me personally, books are these amazing things. They'll outlast our grandkids and our grandkids and like books will be around forever. There's a timeless quality to a book, in my opinion. On the non-fiction side of things, I think if you have a good book, whether it be a self-help book or a marketing book. I'm actually reading a book at the minute about grieving and dealing with grief. Now, I actually haven't have to deal with grief. I've just got people around me who are dealing with it, and I kind of felt like, I just need to proactively understand what they're kind of going through in order for me to be empathetic. And actually, I'm learning so much just from reading this book. And just as the book said, I read for 10, 15 minutes a day. And I wouldn't get that learning personally from reading a fiction book. Now, my wife and I decided, because the weather's so bad, things got cancelled last night, and we went to the cinema. We went to the cinema in Newcastle, and we watched the Black Panther 2 film, and it was amazing. 2.5 hours of just like letting your mind go. So I think it's probably more a mindset of whatever your medium is that you learn from, like, then apply yourself to that medium. For me personally, it's books and podcasts. Books and podcasts are the two that I spend the most time with. Now, some people do audiobooks. Some people want to do, like, I never do learning like online. Like, I don't do like YouTube videos and tutorials and all that kind of stuff. But there's tons of those types of things. So I think I say in the book actually is like, you need to work out how you best learn. It's a bit like, what frustrates me about schools sometimes is like they assume every kid learns exactly the same way, which is not always the same. I look at my own boys and like they all learn slightly differently. And so for me, you almost first and foremost need to like work out within yourself. So like you, Sarah, like, okay, you seem to gravitate towards, let's say, podcast because you're on the move, or you just like to get lost in them. And then I'm not saying don't get your fix of non-fiction, or fictional stuff elsewhere, but once you work that out, then I think like lean into that medium, whatever works for you. And so I struggle. I think it's funny because one of the books that I've read this year that's really changed me since, I suppose, my book's come out is a book called Digital Minimalists by a guy called Cal Newport, and it just talks about how our phones and social media have just dominated our lives. And I've spent the last 6-7 months basically trying to wean myself off social media, and it's been really hard actually. Like I'm clearly addicted. Like that's how we all probably have an addiction to our phones and we just don't realize it. And again, like if I think of how, for me personally, like getting those learnings from a book rather than sitting on my phone all day is healthier for me personally. And you just have to make the time to do it, right? That's the key thing. I think, whenever I'm sat on a train or if I'm on a flight and I just see, or in a restaurant and I just see people on their phones just scrolling away, going down Facebook or Instagram or whatever, their TikTok, whatever they're doing, I'm just like, God, you're wasting your life. You're absolutely. So when people say to me, "Oh, well, I can't find the time to like," and I'm like, pass your phone. I'll be like, right, you were on you. And my mum, like, I'm never on my phone. I'm never on my iPad. You look at her analytics, she's on like 7 hours a day on Facebook or whatever. I'm like, it turns out you're not telling the truth. So like, I don't buy people don't have the time. Like, it doesn't matter how busy you are. Like, if it's important enough to you, it comes back to what the great question, comes back to intentionality. If you really care that much about it, if it's that important to you, you will do it. And if it's not, you won't do it. And so again, for me, it's that alignment with like, what you trying not to regret, or what do those goals look like, and then make times that what are the activities and habits that contribute to those goals, and then make them just part of your life. And so for me, I think a massive, I suppose, learning since reading the Morning Miracle book is just habit building. Like, building good habits in life is just, it's so hard to get them going, and once you've got them, it's like they are habits for life. And so and again, my experience has been like, if you can build good habits, they tend to kill the bad habits just by their very, very nature. And so that's some thinking around that as well.
As part of carving time out for learning, you mentioned podcasts, but you have your own podcast now. Tell me a little bit about that, Molecule to Market.
Yeah, so we launched Molecule to Market in April 2020. It just happened to coincide with COVID, and it's very, very focused on the sector that we operate in. So the two businesses that I'm co-founder of, or founder of one, Raman, and co-founder of Lead Candidate, they both operate in the same sector that I've already mentioned. And what there wasn't was any kind of what I class like a digital platform for conversation. It's all very traditional events related, exhibitions and trade conferences and all that kind of stuff. And what happened is I love podcasts, as I mentioned. I was like, God, there's got to be something in this. But getting a podcast off the ground, as you know, it takes time and being able to get the guests, and then there's the production and the edit and all the good stuff that comes with it. It's a real commitment. And, back to some of the themes we talked about today, like the best podcasts have required like discipline and consistency. There is a graveyard of 5-6 episode podcasts out there like that people were like, I'm going to have a podcast in the last 2 minutes. So for me, I said like, right, we'll give it a year. And just because it coincided with COVID, I think the popularity of the podcast, and it's not like millions of people listen to it or anything like that. It's more, it was something I really enjoyed doing first and foremost. Like I was interviewing people a bit like yourself. You're like, you'll just meet interesting guests and you'll learn from them, and you then build a connection with them, which was one of the positive side effects that I didn't see happening, which was I've been able to build relationships with people that there's no way I could have built that relationship with them otherwise. And they see you in a different light, right? They don't see you as a salesman that's trying to sell them something. They see you as, oh, that's the person that interviewed me and put me in a good light and all that kind of stuff. So there's a real psychological thing, I think, with podcasting that you can use to your advantage, because you're giving people a profile to talk about whatever they want to talk about and make them look good on the whole, which like that I always say to my guests, I'm like, I'm not here to catch you out. I'm actually here to show your best self. And the business benefits for us is it helps us build our network, but it's also helped just positioning us and our businesses like as a thought leader and a facilitator. And it's funny because yesterday I got asked to do like the industry that we work in, like a bit of a roundup of the major trends of the year. Now, if I rewind back 3 years ago, that would have been a massive heavy lift for me, because I would have had to go away, do a little research or get my team to do it. And I was like, you know what? We've done 40 podcasts this year. I've got all my notes. I've got all the summaries. And all I did is went through them, plus what's in my mind from the learning. And I was like, it took me like half an hour to do it. And it might be terrible, to be fair, but I'm sure it's not. But I suppose like that, like if you lean into it and learn as much as possible from them. And for us, it's learning about the industry we work in, but also learning from leaders, so people that have run. I've interviewed people that have run billion-dollar companies, people that the one guy I interviewed recently called Marcelo, he was part of a drug development startup company. I can't remember where was it. I think it wasn't an Alzheimer's drug. I can't remember what the drug product therapeutic area was. And, they started, and 14 months later, the team sold the business for $825 million. Which is an incredible story in its own right. And then the drug got to market and it's helping patients all over the world. Like, really brilliant story. Like, it's rare you meet people like that in the industry. And if I rang the guy up now, and he lives between Boston and Canada, if I rang him and said, hey, do you want to go for dinner? I'm in Toronto or Montreal. I guarantee he'll say yes. And they see you in a different light, which is genuinely fascinating. And I don't know, probably similar to yourself, Sarah. I just enjoy doing it. Like, I really enjoy podcasting. Like, I love interviewing people. I love learning from it. I love reflecting back on it. And people like it. That's the other thing. Like, we get great feedback. We've had loads of good reviews. And when I was being out and about recently traveling, people know who I am, not like in a celebrity sense, but they'll then associate me with the podcast. Because it's done well and we've got great quality guests on, there's like a halo effect, if you like, on the projects that so that's, for anyone listening, like if you can create a podcast that I think that's niche enough and that isn't being done already, or you can do it much better than what's out there, like, but I would really commit to it, like really be disciplined about it. Like, don't be one of those statistics of like another dead podcast. Like, do it and do it really, really well, which is, it's funny, like my next call after this is like with our team of like, right, how do we, combination of your questions, like, right, how do we take it to the next level? What does next year look like? What does the next 18 months like? That's a exciting conversation I've got coming up. But again, it's a good product. It's doing well. It's not necessarily money generating. It's actually just something that's really good from a positioning perspective. But rather than standing still and doing the same thing as we've always done, well, we are thinking about, right, how do we make it better? How do we improve it? And I think that's just good practice with anything that you're doing.
Before we finish, I've got a quick fire round of questions for you. So I'm going to throw things at you and I want a quick one sentence back from you.
Sure.
Delegate and let things go.
Do it. That's my answer. Just do it.
Just do it. Okay. Don't judge, network and cherish social interaction.
Get off your phone.
Next one, lean into becoming a leader.
That's trickier, that one.
I think either people want to follow you or they don't.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a big part of what my learning. It's probably the thing I'm still on that journey where, as our team, a quick anecdote is, I still think I'm one of the gang, but I'm not, and people who join our company now, if I go to the office today and meet some of the new team, like they see me in a completely different light than I see myself. They see me as this author, the guy that founded the company, and blah, 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 all the fancy stuff. And I'm like, I think I'm just me, right? Like, I'm just like, oh no, I'm just like a normal person. And just, I think being very self-aware, I think is really important in terms of as you become a leader in an organization.
Don't ignore your gut instinct.
Best advice ever. Especially for entrepreneurs, like if it feels a bit funny, then follow your instinct. Final
one, beware the curse of complacency.
Yeah, this is the one that worries me the most as we grow as a business. There's a quote, I think, in the book. I did the keynote speaking at the Ward Hadaway Fastest 50, the fastest growing Northeast companies recently. And I started that with the quote from Bill Gates, which is, success is a lousy teacher because it seduces people, smart people, into thinking they cannot fail. And so once people have had a bit of success, people can drop into a state of complacency, like it's back to that standing still and this will be here forever. And I think that's the thing that keeps me up at night, which is like when you get successful, you have a target on your back. It's like football teams, like, it's like the best teams always have to raise their game because they're the ones that everyone wants to beat. And in order to, like, if you look at elite athletes or elite teams, like they have to keep themselves at the absolute kind of peak of their performance. Otherwise, everyone wants to take them down. So I think that's something that I'm very mindful of, and I certainly don't want to happen in our organisation.
Raman, thank you so much. Been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you, Sarah. I have to say I think you might be the best questioner I've definitely come across. Like your questions were really, like, it's funny, I do quite a few interviews and not everyone does their research, I would say. And you can kind of, because you often fall into conversations that are like, oh, tell me about your background. Whereas obviously you'd read the book and you'd done your research. And there's one interviewer to another, I'm like super impressed with how well your questions were. You've really kind of got me thinking, which is credit to you. And thanks to having me on the show. And honestly, for anyone that listening, if you go onto the remansehgal.com website, there's a couple of free chapters. I think the first 50 pages are free on the website. You can download them for free. If you like it, then you can go to Amazon and buy the book. But so just kind of easy for your listeners to kind of get a taste of the book to see if it's for them.
My thanks again to Raman Sehgal, founder and global president of Ram Marketing. If you've enjoyed today's episode, why not go to the full list of Why Small Business Matters podcasts? We've talked Research, Test and Validate from Mark Rennie of Wobbleu recently, Breaking the Tradition of Knowledge Exchange with Kevry, and talking to Charlotte Keenan at Goldman Sachs and Michael Heyman from Seven Hills about how SMEs can drive the economy. So you don't miss the next episode, like or subscribe on your favourite app, and why not leave us a review? Look forward to speaking to you on the next episode of Why Small Business Matters.